Hello everybody, Jim here, because there are a lot of people still wondering if the main weapons on a 600i will be enough to do the job, even though most people can't agree on what the job is. I think it's pretty clear what that job is, and I'm going to tell you what the job is. So, if you feel you've already got a pretty good grasp on how the 600i will be able to, quote, punch a hole through danger before escaping in a relatively straight line, feel free to skip to the demonstration. But before we get to the actual shooting, there are a couple of points I'd like to cover regarding the capabilities of the 600i and the confusion that surrounded it, because some people are still arguing in the comments of my previous video. Hopefully, by the time I'm done here, everything will be clear, and I promise this will be the last video I make on the subject for a good long while. First, yes, I have read the brochure, the Q&A, and all of the comments on both of those posts, as well as all of the comments on my own videos on the topic. I've read the brochure and the Q&A about 10 times each now, and I am very much aware of the situation and people's thoughts on it. I've also seen the video with Ben Lesnick talking about it, and I realize that it confirms a lot of what I'm about to say. Second, people swear up and down that the stats page said the ship had 64 missiles. Though I have not seen it myself, I'm not calling them liars, because that kind of crap happens all the time. It was clearly a mistake, they fixed it immediately, and I'm moving on from that one. Regardless, if you don't like the ship after learning about the mistake, get a refund. They were handing those out like Halloween candy right after the sale. Maybe they still are. On the other hand, if you don't want a refund, then obviously you're pretty happy with the package you got, and your story should probably end there. Third, they also screwed up the mass in the brochure and on the stats page. They said as much in the Q&A for anybody who could be bothered to read the whole thing. According to the latest information, it will probably have much less mass than the stats page says, and it should be very close to the constellation, more on that in a moment, but if you are unhappy with that flub as well, we'll see above regarding refunds. Fourth, lots of people were complaining that there would be no high-end components in this luxury vehicle. I don't know where they got that idea. I found zero indication that that will be the case. The only thing the brochure had to say about it was this, quote, "The 600i houses 4 robust engines, allowing it to outpace most other ships of its class. All that power is distributed between..." Between? Excuse me, that's another mistake. Call their language arts instructor. I demand a refund. That should have been distributed among 12 fixed thrusters that have been seamlessly embedded into the linework of the body, providing higher responsiveness and speed. The 600i's hull features Origin's proprietary new glax plating, allowing the ship to be much lighter than comparatively sized ships, end quote. Comparatively sized ships like the Constellation, or, if you prefer, the Genesis Starliner. That might sound ridiculous, but it's actually about as close to the 600i's size as the Constellation is, so take from that what you will. Also, Ben Lesnick recently confirmed that there would be high-end components in the ship, so we can put that to bed as well. Fifth, the brochure said nothing about agility. Nothing, which came up repeatedly in the comments I read. Agility and maneuverability are two very different things. The brochure said maneuverability, the definition of which happens to include a vessel's top speed and acceleration, and you can feel free to look that up. Also, don't forget that the ability to accelerate in a new direction, the 600i strength, is part of maneuverability, as much as the ability to turn the ship a little faster. So it is, in fact, maneuverable. Here's what the brochure says. Quote, "Although the 600i relies on speed and maneuverability to avoid trouble, it features a comprehensive offensive and defensive package to back you up in case conflict is unavoidable. A pair of remote turrets, each with a pair of size 2 mounts and 3 fixed size 5 weapon positions, can forcefully deter anything unlucky enough to be caught in their path." That paragraph is incredibly descriptive, and if the ship actually has high acceleration top speed, completely accurate. And it says nothing about being, quote, more maneuverable than a Constellation, only that it would rely on its maneuverability, which is completely true. Again, I'm sorry if you felt misled, but again, see above regarding refunds. If you weren't happy, I really do hope you got your money back. Now, what the brochure tells us about the actual purpose of the engines and weapons is more interesting to me than what the misinterpretation of the line led some people to believe. The words forcefully deter anything unlucky enough to get caught in their path, when combined with the words avoiding trouble, the declared speed, and the large forward-mounted weapons suggest to me that anybody in the 600i should be running from fights while they clear the path ahead with the front guns. If you think that seems silly, considering you can travel in 3 dimensions in Star Citizen, remember that ships, especially larger ships, can be pulled out of quantum by anything in their path. So, you're going to need to keep the people out of your way if you want to flee. I got blocked by a cutlass last night, twice, and it kind of pissed me off, so I blew it up with 3 size 4 weapons. It's pretty handy, actually. Okay, finally, the weapons. The 600i can mount size 5 weapons or gimbaled size 4 weapons. I just wanted to take a moment to show you how big even those size 4 weapons really are. Even when gimbaled, each of the 3 forward guns on the 600i is nearly as long as some of the ships you'll be, blowing out of the sky with them. Think of like the premier pirate boarding vessel, the Dragonfly. This gun is about as big as one of those, if not longer. Even larger ships, like the Cutlass or Caterpillar, will be focusing on getting out of the line of fire. I don't have any concrete proof of this, but I do have anecdotal evidence, as the first thing ships do when I begin unloading with my Starfarer is scatter and regroup. I like it when that happens because it means they respect my authority. Interestingly, the 600i should be able to mount more size 5 weapons than the Constellation Aquila, so when the weapons are fixed, the total DPS of both ships is actually very, very close. But we're not here to pit the 600i against any of the constellations. We're here to see what the 600i will look like in a fight. Since most people seem to want gimbaled weapons and the ship is designed to punch a hole through the enemies and plow ahead to freedom, what we really need is a ship that hits just as hard, but has less speed and maneuverability than a Constellation. As it happens, I have just such a ship. The Gemini has about half the turning speed of a Constellation, so I think we can probably agree that it's slower than the 600i will be in every respect. I popped one of the weapons off the front of my ship, so it should have about the same loadout, actually exactly the same loadout as your average 600i owner. Let's see how it does with enemy fighters as they fly head-on. I think you'll mostly find that I just shoot a bunch and when I hit them, they pop. Bigger ships like Cutlasses take more work, but they still go down. I think players get confused because they spend minute upon minute blasting away with size 2 weapons seemingly to no effect, so they think that size 4 weapons will need half as many minutes to achieve the same thing. Not so. See, piddling little weapons take time to get through piddling little shields, and piddling little shields come back up very quickly, so that the piddling little weapons need to take them down again. When you have several guns as long as a mid-sized sedan, piddling little shields don't offer much resistance. They buckle. Then the ship behind them buckles. Then you go on your way. Sometimes, I like to take my Gemini out to watch fighters struggle with other fighters from a distance, just so I can laugh when I step in and swat the pirates away with a single salvo. If a ship or two does manage to survive long enough to complete a pass on my Gemini, I go to Quantum while they pepper my shields. The 600i has weaker shields but a much higher top speed. In fact, if it's even a little faster than the Constellation, and it will be, the speed should be on par with some of the slower fighters, which is just crazy to me. I wouldn't think that a yacht should have as high an SCM, or Standard Combat Maneuver Speed, I think that's what it stands for, as any fighter at all, to say nothing of the afterburner speeds, but it looks like this might be the case. So there you go. And for those of you who skipped the research and theory crafting bit, I'll summarize here. The 600i is not meant to engage other ships in a dogfight. It's supposed to punch a hole through the ships in front of it and flee. For this ship, speed is actually more important than maneuverability, like by a long shot. And here's a final thought to take home with you. Even if you're in a Constellation, a little extra boom probably isn't going to save you. The minor difference in guns doesn't really mean much, and here's why. Knowing CIG the way I do, the superior speed they keep talking about may allow the 600i to outpace the Constellation, but it isn't going to be anything like fast enough to outrun high-end fighters. And the Constellation may be more maneuverable than the 600i, but it still can't outmaneuver fighters. Right now, the Constellation is essentially broken as far as I'm concerned, and CIG has given no indication that they intend to fix that. It gets eaten alive by fighters. Despite the bigger guns, it's basically a sitting duck. I know this because, as so many people are fond of pointing out, I am a painfully average player in this game. Well, thanks for proving my point, suckers, because I've taken out several Constellations by myself in my Mustang Delta, a mediocre fighter if ever there was one, because stupid nerfed rockets. Anyway, if an average player can do that in a middle-of-the-road fighter, then maybe the difference between the Constellation and the 600i weapons is pointless. And for those of you who are thinking, what about the Merlin? You weren't fighting a Merlin. The Constellation has a Merlin. You should also be fighting a Merlin. Well, let's pretend for a moment that lone pirates and subpar fighters aren't going to be the norm in Star Citizen. Fun fact, they won't be. Pirates like to hunt in groups because they're lazy cowards. And imagine that the imaginary Merlin was busy with my imaginary buddy who was in a vastly superior ship, which could be pretty much any other fighter in the game. So that's where the Merlin was. And for those of you thinking, Jim, you didn't have to deal with a point defense system on the Phoenix, and you yourself said that the Phoenix was the only real competition for the 600i. What about the point defense system, Jim? I say, what about it? It's not done yet, so we don't know how good it'll be. What if, gasp, it's rubbish? We also don't know how fast a 600i will be, or what the acceleration will be like. What if the 600i accelerates so quickly to such an incredible top speed that the Phoenix will look stupid, trying to protect itself with guns while the 600i protects itself with ridiculous distance? You know, using distance as defense is essentially what America did to the majority of both world wars. We only used guns when we thought things were kind of out of hand, and it worked out great for us. In the end, we may discover that in either ship, you need to have a fighter escort or run at the first sign of trouble, and the 600i is better at running, so something to ponder. Or maybe you think the 600i won't be fast. That's cool. You may be right. But don't try to prove me wrong by quoting engine-to-mass ratios and comparing that to flight-ready ships with provable speeds. You can see right here that the mass on the stats page is, gasp, incorrect. I mean, like everything else on the stats page. Anyway, and I'd like to point out that even when the mass and engine stats are correct, they're still completely meaningless. Ship speeds are not determined by the engine-to-mass ratios. Ship speeds change constantly, while the stats page remains the same because speeds are determined by the ship's role in relation to its price. If the speeds ever end up being predictable by the engines and mass, it'll be because the engines and mass have been changed to match the speed CIG picked for the ship. Don't try to use science here. Currently, Star Citizen ship speed determination is a science-free zone. But so what if the speed of the 600i won't save it from fighters? Both it and the Constellation will get eaten alive together, in harmony, like France and England during World War I. But never mind that. The moral of the story here is, take an escort. Most likely, neither ship will be good enough to handle a handful of fighters alone. Now, I'd like to thank everybody for watching, subscribing, and particularly commenting. I had a lot of fun arguing with people in my last 600i video. I even had fun arguing with the ones I referred to as fools, children, and idiots. Now that most of us have had time to cool off, I hope the people that I insulted with my childish taunts are watching, so I can tell you I meant every word. And I will see you, well, most of you, next time.